Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Hired Geek Podcast, episode number 66 with Samyr Qureshi, the CEO and co-founder of Knack, who I've had the pleasure of working with over the past several months, doing some content creation. So really excited to talk more with Samyr and hear a little bit more about his story and just really how he's focused on building a mission-driven company within the higher ed world, and how he came to work in this unique space with Knack. So definitely go check them out and everything that we mentioned down in the show notes. But thanks for listening. And without further ado, this is episode number 66 with Samyr Qureshi.
Cool. So let's go ahead and dive in, and we will start off as we always do. I know, of course, as it always goes, we know each other a little bit, but just want to introduce yourself to the audience and give a brief overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Cool. Yeah. Samyr Qureshi, co-founder and CEO of Knack. And a little bit more about my professional journey. I graduated from the University of Florida in Gainesville in 2014 and had the opportunity to work at some really awesome companies like Apple and Gartner, a large market research and technology advisory firm, and really sort of was excited with the application of technology in terms of driving a strong social impact in different realms. And education had always sort of been a big part of my life. I'm a first-generation immigrant, moved to the U.S. when I was 7 with my mom and my sister, really to sort of chase the proverbial American dream and get a college degree at some point and go out into the workforce. And so, I had always sort of valued the importance of education in my life and what it was able to do for myself and my family. And so after working in technology for a little while, I got a little bored at the larger companies and felt like it would be more up my alley to work on something where I felt like there was a stronger impact in my work. And so sort of started to apply the principles of sharing economy with this idea of building a peer-to-peer network for educational purposes on college campuses, which ultimately led me to building Knack with an incredible team of 10 other folks.
Very cool. Yeah. And that's how I have come to know you, is through your work at Knack, which is some pretty awesome stuff that you're getting up to there. And just I appreciate the opportunity to learn more and kind of contribute to the kind of early stages of your company through writing and stuff like that. And just looking forward to all the cool stuff with that. And we'll dig in a little bit more with it a little bit later on here. But I guess, yeah, I'm curious, like, maybe it was like connections that you made, or just like any anecdotes or like advice that you learned from when you were in college that you feel like are like still resonating for you today, personally or professionally. Because it seems like you got off on a path that you, eventually kind of moved away from, and like, but obviously perhaps still learned valuable things that are still transferable. But I guess anything that comes to mind of like impactful things from your own college experience.
Yeah. So, I actually earned my associate's degree, my 2-year degree in high school. There was a really unique program that the community had developed, which basically gave students pathways to achieving associate's degrees for free. And I was then able to sort of take that and transfer to the University of Florida, but was still sort of that 18-year-old age where I was sort of ahead of the curve in terms of getting that degree. So the beauty of that was, when I got to campus, I sort of already had a perspective of what it was like to self-manage and take some courses on my own through the community college experience. And I was student body president at the community college actually while I was in high school. So I had a lot of perspective around sort of student involvement and what that collegiate experience could be. Drastically different at the community college, state college level, but nonetheless, it was impactful. And I think when I got to the University of Florida, what really stuck with me through my learnings of student leadership was that, relationships really pay off over time, and not necessarily just from like a professional standpoint, but also from a developmental standpoint. I had the pleasure of being a part of many different student organizations at the University of Florida when I transferred, and was involved socially in a fraternity. And through that process, I built some really amazing relationships, which actually ended up leading me to meeting my first co-founder, which is Dennis, who I started Knack with. So I think really sort of highlighting the importance of the folks that you meet and the circles that you sort of mingle in, can pay off both professionally and then also personally. I mean, I still stay in touch with some incredible people that I had met in college that I could call up at virtually any hour of the day, any day of the week, and say, "Hey, I'm really needing you for X, Y, or Z, or would love to run something by you." And that sort of camaraderie that's built on a peer-to-peer basis is really, really powerful. And I think if you foster those relationships over time, they can then blossom into becoming more opportunistic for things that could present themselves in the future. And in my case, that was starting Knack. So relationships are valuable, and I think really fostering them in a genuine and authentic manner can allow for a lot of fruitful sort of results down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's like you never would have known at that time that it's like, oh, this person may be my co-founder for a company someday. But like, yeah, it's just like you never know, and it's just a beautiful thing, when those things can happen. And I think it is a perfect segue for just bringing us to the present day and your current work. So, you are doing like really unique things within the higher ed landscape of, like you said, kind of, really, it's like amplifying tutoring kind of capabilities or just like the outcomes of tutoring services at universities. And I'm just curious of like the work that you're doing now, and whether it's just doing, this sort of work in terms of peer tutoring specifically, or just being like, your own boss or whatever, like being, like leading people. Like, what is it about like the current work that you're doing that's keeping you like energized and inspired, and just, things that you just really enjoy about the current work you're doing now?
Well, I definitely have a boss, and where
everybody does, right? Yeah.
Co-founder and a CEO of a company, I really feel like we're accountable to students ultimately. And I think, the buyers of our product are the administration, and oftentimes provosts or deans or VPs of student affairs and academic affairs, but ultimately they're trusting us with their students. And I think what's really exciting about the work we do today is that, we're not necessarily, just because we're growing our profit, it's very much incongruent with the impact we can have as an organization. And I think there's something really special about aligning the incentives so that the larger your business gets from a growth, market penetration and revenue standpoint, the more of an impact you can have on people's lives. And I think what's really special about Knack, and I think honestly what keeps me going every day, is the idea that, they're very much in line. So if I'm going to focus on doing some sales meetings, ultimately, if that deal gets across the finish line, it means we have an opportunity to impact people's lives in two ways, right? The nature of the peer-to-peer work that we do means that a student isn't just getting help on the receiving end, but another student who's best positioned, sometimes uniquely positioned to offer help, has also received an opportunity of financial mobility, right? Or even if it's service learning or volunteer based, which some campuses run this program as a volunteer based sort of activity, there's some growth that takes place there in co-development, as we call it. It's not just, maybe Dustin tutoring Samyr. I'm not just sort of receiving the help that I need to go on and retain as a student, but you as Dustin are probably, building a really strong relationship and also honing some of those 21st century skills that everyone's sort of talking about: teamwork, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, which can then ultimately set you up for not just success, in college and within the academic landscape, but then obviously for life. Those are skills that I think higher ed has been talking about more recently as being really essential, not just in the academic sense, but also for lifelong. And so, sort of our mission and tagline, even as a company, which is grow together, is sort of how do we align the incentives so that everybody's benefiting and folks can contribute to this process in a way where everyone wins. And I think because of that, again, it's awesome, because if, we impact more students, we usually end up signing more customers. And if we sign more customers, we get to impact more students on both sides of the equation. So I think that's what's really exciting. And again, as having that sort of first gen perspective, I had never thought I would be working in education, although it was such a big piece of my life in terms of why I came here, why my mom made some of the sacrifices she did, and why I was always sort of trying to figure out my next path in terms of getting a degree. This was really full circle for me to say, what, I think there's an opportunity to leave a corporate job and really devote time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears into this to just see it, really come to fruition and watch people's lives light up from the standpoint of getting that degree they always wanted and passing that class that was just so difficult for them. But then on the flip side, having that form of economic mobility where they were able to offset their student loans, or instead of being an Uber driver or being a barista, they could honestly, offer their skills back to their peers on campus and earn that same sort of, side hustle or income to be happy and successful.
Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. So much good stuff there. Yeah. Because that's what I love, like stuff that you're kind of plugged in with or aware of, and like just that impact and making sure that you're achieving that outcome of like, tutoring done right and in a thoughtful way can really be so beneficial for the tutor and the tutee, and like, all those sort of things. And like, it's just like being like really conscious about that, and having that like personal resonance of your own path, and like just helping to kind of pay it forward. Certainly similar sentiments that I have of like working in higher education, of like, I got so much from it, and being able to, help impact other students' success and in any way that I can, just has a lot of meaning, and definitely helps keep me inspired. So, I guess I'm curious on any of maybe those like concepts that you mentioned that are sort of themes of the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve with the the campuses and the students that you work with. Like, what are you geeking out about? If it's like, I don't know if you really plug in with like reading or watching or listening to content on those sort of topics, or any other just like personal hobbies or things that you do for fun. Like, what are you geeking out about right now? And I guess tell any kind of story, I guess, that you have with that.
Sure. Definitely sort of try to stay plugged in and well-rounded in many ways, but it's difficult. I mean, as a early stage technology startup, we've got, a team of 10, but we got to operate like we got a team of 100. So we're always trying to sort of, push the envelope in terms of getting more output than what we're able to humanistically put in. But I think what's really sort of been interesting to me lately is the theme of social entrepreneurship. And there's an amazing podcast hosted by NPR that I listen to called How I Built This. And, they bring on different entrepreneurs. The most recent one I listened to was about a company called Allbirds. They're a pretty hot sort of shoe company, actually. They make what's dubbed as the world's most comfortable shoe. And their story was very much around, they wanted to create this minimalistic shoe that felt really nice, looked really nice, but they also had the strong sort of value of sustainability in the DNA of the company. And so they wanted to create basically the most sustainable and the most comfortable shoe. And so again, sort of trying to weave those threads together of doing what's best for society, what's best for people, what's best for really the world, and sort of, looking at that as your duty in business, not just of maximizing your bottom line, but also of maximizing that impact. So that's sort of, one realm when you think about it, as podcasts and sort of reading different perspectives on social entrepreneurship. There's another really interesting foundation that I've started to really pay attention to called the Long Now Foundation, and it's a nonprofit based in San Francisco that's very much sort of trying to plant the seed of taking more of a long-term approach and thinking more about larger issues and how that actually affects society versus sort of more short-term, urgent things like maximizing profit and those sorts of things. So, I think one of their main taglines is value the deeply important over the merely urgent. And so what they're really trying to do is get folks to think about things from a really broad perspective and a long-term perspective. So again, things like climate change, ethical debates of artificial intelligence and what that means for sort of the future of mankind. I mean, I think it's sort of our own duty of this generation to be thinking about these things, because that has collateral effect on the future. And so I'm very much sort of interested in this sort of long-term philosophical conversation around, why are humans here? What are we meant to really be doing when it comes to sort of contributing to society? And probably stems from my sociology degree and criminology, but I'm just really fascinated with that sort of stuff. And then you bring in the element of how does business fall into that, and not that sort of, predatory business of maximizing profits and, and sort of, focusing on shareholder value, but instead focusing on another shareholder or stakeholder, which in my eyes should be the world and the people that you're impacting.
Well, I know, because Salesforce, which I've used several times in different jobs and stuff like that, and I had the opportunity to visit their office. They have that philosophy of donating time and money and their product to make sure that they're helping to have a positive impact. And then just companies are really trying to infuse and it's okay, what sort of snacks or cutlery do we have in our office kitchen? Let's do all that sustainably, and also invest in renewable energy to power our building, and just that kind of thoughtful, intentional kind of effort is very well placed, and embodies the values of the company, and just making sure that you're, you still can be a profitable, growing company, but leaving a positive impact in so many ways. But yeah, it's so great that you're, because it's one of those things that I think it can be hard if it's well, I'm only now thinking of it as my company has been around for decades and we've grown and we've got really used to the way that we do things. Having that mindset starting out is going to be so valuable, I imagine, just to really set that precedent. But then also, I have that episode of about Allbirds downloaded on my phone, so I need to listen to it. Good to know that it was an engaging one.
Yeah, it's great. And just on Salesforce, I mean, they're a great company. I think what I try to really think about is, what does the world look like if this business or this venture became ubiquitous? And I think, Salesforce, talk about renewable sort of resources and maybe the cutlery they're using in their kitchen being, compostable or whatever it may be. That's great. And I think, it's sort of their take on saying, what are the effects that we're having as we grow? Are people being mindful of using, sustainable materials or whatever it may be? Can we go carbon neutral? That's in my eyes, it's almost reactionary based off of values. But I think if you can project as an organization at the earliest stage what your values are, and then sort of be deliberate and intentional around forming the business in a way that can achieve that, it's got a different effect. So that Salesforce example to me seems, it's great, and I'm glad they're doing it, but I'm thinking, how can you build a business where if this thing becomes ubiquitous, it's just incredible for the world? And there's amazing examples like SpaceX and Tesla and, companies that are doing really great things. Allbirds is one of them, if you ask me, because if everyone was wearing Allbirds, then that would be in many ways the most sustainable shoe out there in their eyes. So I think there's different sort of perspectives around how you can almost clean up some of the damage you've done as you become a bigger company and sort of have that opportunity to fix some of the problems you've caused. But then there's also the opportunity of just building a business that naturally will do good as it scales. And I think a lot of folks sort of put them in the same category, and I like to ensure that there is a bit of a distinction, but they're both great.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, because Salesforce just sells software, so it's okay, yeah, I mean that can sometimes help maybe a social good organization, some nonprofit, when they donate their product, to do better, to do more work to help more people or whatever. But yeah, it's they're basically just wanting to be well, we're just a software company, but we our buildings are really energy efficient or whatever, that is different, where because it's the idea of seeing people, and I'm really happy about the proliferation of Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burger, because they've started to measure how much of how much more sustainable those meat alternatives are, and they taste very similar, they present very similar, so they should be able to be pretty widely adopted, and a lot of major chains are utilizing them now. But that idea of just if everybody, if everywhere had that and more people ate that, we wouldn't have to waste so much energy and grains and just all this with raising cattle and doing all that, so it's those sort of things. Yeah, definitely a distinctly different, where but the nature of just them existing there. Yeah, you're saying, their business growing just creates a more positive impact versus just well, we're here and we do whatever we do, so we might as well just try to be energy efficient or something. Yeah, there's definitely a distinction there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess I'm curious, anything else, maybe it's just classics for you, go-to stuff that you'd want to just kind of give a tip of the hat to, but anything else that you're reading, watching, and or listening to, any content that's, newer stuff that you've just discovered, or again, just classics for you, fundamental sort of things, anything that you want to recommend that we could include in the show notes?
Yeah. there's a sort of there's a podcast right now that's kind of gone viral, at least in my circles. Joe Rogan, the one and only, was the one that's actually hosted the podcast. It's with a gentleman named Naval Ravikant, who co-founded a company called AngelList, and it definitely, to my knowledge, wasn't his first venture. But he's sort of known as like this new age philosopher in technology, and even outside of technology. Just some of he really sort of got famous off of Twitter. He had this pretty sort of recognized tweet storm that he did, where he sort of talks about and makes some statements that I think resonated a lot with people. But he's insanely succinct with what he says, and it's so powerful. And so I think his website, or one of his fans built a website called the angelphilosopher.com or .org, but his name is Naval, Naval, Ravikant, Ravikant. And that podcast with Joe Rogan is incredible. They talk about things like AI and universal basic income, and what the future sort of holds with the way that things are moving. And it's a long one. I think it's like 2 hours. As a lot of Joe Rogan's sort of unstructured, raw content, but this one was just really profound. And even if you just find the show notes and kind of peruse through them, it's really interesting stuff. And Naval is a pretty spectacular guy. He's on my dream list to meet. But I think that's one. And then I've started to sort of dabble back into some early philosophy reading about like Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius's readings on meditations. So I've just sort of started to dabble back into that sort of reading. I was reading a lot of business books for a while, but once you're sort of at the point where you're working a lot, sometimes you need a break. And I'm not a big fiction person. I've always been really big into nonfiction. But yeah, that's a really interesting one. And then just other things that I'm sort of into, and always trying to find where the intersection of that lies with just general happiness for me, is I play music, and I think there's so much that can come from having an escape or a creative outlet. And obviously for some people it's other things, drawing, yoga, meditation. For me, it's always sort of been music. And so that's encompasses sort of watching live music, but then also playing music and sometimes producing music. So it's been a good outlet for me as well, which has sort of kept me sane up until now.
Yeah, very good. I actually just talked to another person for this podcast that is, big into music as a nice creative, relaxing outlet. So just always funny sometimes, like catching patterns, because also like how I built this and like some other podcasts, just like I tend to talk to a lot of people who like that show, which I think it's a very popular show. It's a really great show too. But yeah, just funny seeing like certain patterns that way. But very cool. Well, I guess on the, kind of all those notes that you've mentioned, with, your business or just things that you're connecting with and anything like that, always like to end on the optimistic note of anything or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world. So anything that comes to mind that you are just looking forward to that you would like to share.
The idea of being able to sort of prove our thesis. We've been around as a business for about 4 years now, and first year we were really deliberate in building a product that resonated with students. And the first 3 years after launching the product, we're very much focused on just going direct to student and having thousands of students use our platform across 60 different campuses in the country, to now have institutions both domestically in the United States and internationally interested in what we're doing is really exciting. And I think what I'm really looking forward to is being able to really show the efficacy and the impact of what we're doing. So ASU is one of our customers, and we're really excited. We're going to be writing a efficacy sort of white paper research study on the platform and the impact it has. And we've anecdotally heard stories from our students that use the product saying how much this has really helped them, again, not just succeed in the classroom, but build really meaningful relationships and friendships. And on the flip side, folks that have said, I literally wasn't able to pay my rent unless I was tutoring on Knack. And through that, I was able to really sort of find a path that allowed me to, have more freedom with financial freedom. So, being able to sort of package up all these data points that we've heard over the years and the excitement from the institutions and really turn that into hard data that can stand on its own, is really exciting to me, because I think it's pretty simple to understand that as students continue to use these sorts of support services, especially on a peer-to-peer level, there's just so much more that's happening, that's sometimes hard to capture. Again, those relationships that are built, the economic mobility that comes on one side. So I think really telling a big story with that is going to be exciting. We've again had instances where we can prove that, but to really say we were able to move these metrics on these campuses and impact these students, which led them to these places, I think is just a really powerful story.
Yeah, well, I think too, like I can see different, like, because I bet it's like certain things like that you'd want to, put the time forth to it that it deserves, and like getting into like moments in time and phases where you're almost like doing a roadshow where you have that story, you've collected enough data, you're able to like present it in a really like engaging way, and it's like let's like just get out there and start telling the story more. And like that idea of like, yeah, you put that like white paper together, and like some people like get around to a lot of conferences and do sessions or whatever, but like yeah, it would just be really exciting to see, like you say, like you're proving out your thesis and being able to start to tell that story more and more with just continually growing confidence, because it's like, yeah, it's like been, yeah, like the product's been out like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, like it just you keep having more sort of patterns and trends and information, and yeah, like those anecdotes and those things that you can share from the impact that it's had for students. So yeah, definitely something to look forward to. I look forward to kind of witnessing that happening, and grateful that we've been able to get connected and have this really great conversation here, and appreciate all that you've shared. And we'll make sure to include ways to connect with all that you mentioned, the resources and stuff, and then connect with Knack as well. But yeah, just appreciate your time, and yeah, just thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for what you do here. And I think it's pretty remarkable for you to just do this as something for the community in higher ed. And I'm sure a lot of folks really appreciate the content. And I know we've obviously really enjoyed working with you and hope to continue that relationship. So thanks for having us on.
This podcast is part of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices in the higher ed community. Check us out on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod or at connectedu.network. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.